Well, we just heard from the HSRC on the challenge of hunger in the country. We continue with the conversation and look now at food wastage. According to the World Food Programme, global hunger isn't about a lack of food. It is about losing food on the food chain, from the farms to supermarkets and even in households. The WFP says nearly a fifth of all food produced each year is wasted or lost before it can be consumed. Well, let's look at what can be done. I'm joined by Sandy Bukula, CEO of the organization Operation Hunger. A very good afternoon to you, Sandy. Thanks very much for your time. Are we wasting a lot of food?
Hi, Via. Thank you very much. We definitely are losing a lot of food within the country. I think the stats basically speak for themselves. We have a bit of a gap when it comes to the dysfunctionality within our food systems. And I think that is basically very much prevalent to the fact that we've got such a huge number of households going hungry, but then we have got a number of food that is basically being destroyed.
How? How is this happening?
So it's quite a bit of a complex matter, but just to simplify it. So what is happening is that the current food systems that we've got for the country have highlighted a dysfunction just basically from production from production to consumption to all the way to basically, within the food supply and so forth. So that is basically what we have seen so far. So what would happen is, for example, due to the number of consumers that are able to afford to buy an inclusive, a bread food basket, we still have quite a number of people that are unable to purchase or that cannot be able to afford to purchase the entire food basket. So what normally happens is, especially for perishable foods, we see then that number of what has been produced and what has been prepared for market going out into spoils, because basically there's not enough people that are able to purchase, and basically the purchase power is lower than the actual production number.
Well, this is not deliberate, right? It's a function of a number of factors which someone else along the chain can say, beyond my control.
I wish I could say that. I wish that I could say that. I think basically in 2019, in 2020, we delivered a full report, a research report that showcases the gaps within our food system as Operation Hunger, to show basically the areas where there are potential possibilities and opportunities. And I'll just highlight a few things. For example, you'd see that our policies in agriculture, in terms of what the concentration of the food production, we've been basically really focused on energy food products like wheat, and not enough a variety in terms of fresh fruits and vegetables. And what that has done is it has resulted in having a population of our country, about 36.6% of our household have scored under the diversity scorecard. And that has been consistent for the past 5 years, which basically has been an increase from the previous years, from 2019 going down by about 2.3%. So that is obviously worrying. And the second thing that I would basically talk about would be the unilateral concentration in terms of the financing available, as well as the policy backing up, in terms of the food supply and the commodity, in terms of what we are producing and what is actually being devised for and what is being funded for. So we're looking at basically the commodity, again, being the interest of the exports, but not very much looking in terms of diversifying and centralizing other markets that are looking at a diverse type of crops that we can grow within the country, that would actually relatively bring down the cost of basically a healthy diet, so that everybody can actually be able to access. So those are one of just basically from a high level, from high level. Secondly, we would look at basically the infrastructure of the country, which has not really improved in terms of, like the differences between urban as well as the rural communities. Because I'll give you a simple example with us at Operation Hunger. So in the Eastern Cape province, the areas that we actually, the areas that we provide with food aid that we basically feed. So what you would do is you would have, let's say, a cluster of villages. I'll take Umkanduli for an example. So you've got about 8 cluster of villages within Umkanduli. Within Umkanduli itself, you don't have an immediate, a big retail shop for a supermarket. So in order for you to be able to get groceries in Umkanduli, you'd have to basically take a taxi, and the taxi you would actually have to purchase at in Elliot, which is basically almost the central town, close, or either you would have to go to Umtata. Now, if you were to consider this, now you have to think about this, looking at the scourging food inflation at the moment, right? And also the non-increase in terms of, in terms of funds available to households. And that is basically inclusive, looking at what people are earning, like the majority of the people are earning, basically, and we would use basically the low-income household as a base. Now, what you think about is to say, if you would have to inclusively think about putting in perishable goods as well as non-perishable goods, it becomes very difficult for them to be able to purchase non-perishable goods because they're always available at a much more higher price. And also, they're not going to be able to carry you out throughout the month. So what then normally happens is that the population then depends on staple foods, which is basically your wheat energy foods that are also not as macronutrient dense, but that is what they are able to basically take to sustain them throughout the month, because the cost of actually having, of having vegetables and buying vegetables is so expensive. So then what would happen is that the stock that is acquired by the stores, because it's non-perishable goods and it is at such an expensive price, so it basically goes without being not sold. But over the past, but only within the urban areas, we've been able, to permeate an ad hoc system for food rescue. So what would normally happen is, like, while the food is still in preservations, but it's not it's almost close to get out of food shelf, we are able to basically rescue those foods, and then we are able to deliver them to the beneficiaries or people that are currently, that are vulnerable to food insecurity. So we have got those types of services available, but they're not enough, because the problem is actually quite centric. It's in the policy making, it's in basically looking at the food system and the food environment for South Africa, and breaking it down and seeing if whether is it able to basically, service everybody. Is it delivering diets? Is it delivering healthy diets? Is it accessible to everyone? Is it accessible to just basically the people that are living below the lower bound rate in the country? So it's quite complex, but it can be fixed.
Sandy, I so wish we had more time, because there's room for, I think, a wider and deeper conversation among those policy-making shortcomings that you've identified, but also how other people like your organization are doing in their respective little corners to try and address this problem. For now, though, we're going to leave it there. Thanks very much for your time. She's, of course, the CEO of the organization Operation Hunger. A very sad and troubling story, if you ask me, especially on the back, of course, of that very first survey in 30 years that is now pointed out, that is pointing to a problem we're having, a deepening crisis of malnutrition in this country.